All right. So thank you everyone for joining this capacity building session, Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer. I would also like to thank the Environmental Law Working Group for their efforts in organizing these capacity building series. So to start with the outline of today's presentation, we will start with an introduction and quick historical background about the convention, and then we will talk about the ozone layer depletion, Vienna Convention, Montreal Protocol, and lessons learned for future progresses. So, Vienna Convention, as a quick introduction about today's topic, the Vienna Convention on the Protection of the Ozone Layer is an international agreement that considered as one of the most important governance tool in the field of environmental governance and the international cooperation in tackling environmental challenges. So in 1985, the convention was signed to address the issue of ozone depletion, and then there was like a proposition to work towards the protection of the Earth's ozone by doing regulations in terms of the production and consumptions and etc. And also controlling the chemical substances that is causing the depletion. So we would also today to discuss about the ozone layer rule in protecting life on Earth and why it's like a big deal, what was happening back then, and what's the significance and importance of this convention in tackling other environmental challenges. All right, so let's start about talking about the causes and effects. Generally speaking, the main importance of the ozone layer is that it's affecting the ozone depletion was affecting the Earth in general. It was also affecting several other challenges in terms of human health that was threatening the humankind, including some dangerous diseases like cancer, like cataracts, and etc. So what's happening is that the first cause of the ozone layer depletion was the unresponsible use of certain chemicals that I'm gonna specify in my next slides that affected the ozone layer. And what was happening is that these chemicals reacted with with um, the sun rays, the UV rays that caused the releasing of chlorine atoms into the ozone layer that causes the depletion in the layer, and which further was impacting the whole life on Earth. So to give you an overview about the examples of these substances and chemicals, we had the main two substances that was widely used in the industry, mainly in refrigerators, air conditioners, and also the hairsprays. That was the chlorofluorocarbons and hydrochlorofluorocarbons. So these two dangerous chemicals were widely applied in several industrial applications without knowing their severe impact. So, and that's what we will discuss later on. Another examples of the substances was halogens and carbon tetrachloride and methyl bromide. So also those were mainly used in some sort of the solvents and chemical industry. So just to the overall agreement is it works in two main parts. The first one is the Vienna Convention, which is the framework, and then we have the Montreal Protocol, which is the practical commitment towards that. So by 1974, scientists noticed the severe impact of these chemical substances, and the first publications about the hypothesis of the chemicals that we produce are harming the ozone layer, and that's also having a severe impact on health and the planet. So scientists found that those chemicals are very harming the industry. They are very harming the human health and also causing the depletion of the ozone layer. So by the year 1977, UNEP concluded a world plan of action on the ozone layer, and then followed in the 1981, the UNEP's governing council authorized the United Nations Environment Program to draft a global framework convention on tackling the ozone layer depletion. And that's where on the 22nd of March, 1985, the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer was went into effect. So main points about the Vienna Convention is that it was originally signed by 28 countries in Vienna by 1985. And then the main goal of the convention was mainly to protect the ozone layer by doing the framework to regulate the production and consumption of the substances that I mentioned earlier on. It also was aiming to promote international cooperation and exchange of scientific and technical information to tackle that, in addition to financing mechanisms that I'm going to mention in the Montreal Protocol. So the convention has been ratified by 198 countries, making it one of the most widely treaties in the history, and it would be one of the most important breakthrough in the field of environmental governance. So talking about the Montreal Protocol, and it's very important to highlight here that the protocol is part of the Vienna Convention, and in order for member states and countries to sign for the Montreal Protocol, they had to be accepting, and they had to be a signatory of the Vienna Convention first. The protocol was convened in 1987, 16th of September to be specified, and then the protocol went into effect in the 1989. And again, in the domain of the multilateral negotiations and intergovernmental committees, that was considered as a very effective time range, as by the 1st of January 1989, they already agreed into taking the protocol in effect. So in 1990, states parties agreed to phase out the substances listed in 1987 by the year 2000, and to phase out halogens, and with an exception of few other substances for very essential user. So the protocol had few amendments, and these amendments also included the raising the ambitions and the commitment towards phasing out the dangerous substances. Also, it included the mechanisms of financing and supporting developing countries. Very quickly, starting with London Amendment in the year 1990, there was some sort of an introduction of interim multilateral fund to mainly provide assistance to developing countries for the compliance procedures, and then followed by 1992 Copenhagen Amendment made that interim funding mechanisms as a permanent one, raising the financial commitments from developed countries, raising the ambitions between all member states to the convention and the protocol. And also by the year 1997, there was Montreal Amendment that was working on getting countries to establish and implementing a licensing system for import and export of all sorts of the controlled substances. So it's not only phasing out, but also working on licensing mechanisms, working on controlling the already produced substances for a very responsible use. I'll also mention about the 1999 Beijing Amendment, and that was also working off meeting the basic domestic needs. Also, that's in the sort of the exceptions of the controlled substances. Just to sum up, as of today, the agreements, both the Vienna Convention and the Montreal Protocol, have been very successful in addressing the global problem of the ozone layer depletion. I'll show you the progress, but a very important point to highlight here is that the significance of this convention and agreement is that it was the first one in the history to address a long-term problem. So science has been telling us that we are facing major problems in the environmental challenges, in the climate change, in the ozone depletion. And you could notice that the first scientific publication was around 11 years before the convention take into place, but still, from 1974 until 1985, and also 1987, where we started to follow the regulations of the protocol, a lot of criticisms in terms of the public awareness, the public acceptance, the pressure from lobbyists, from companies and industries working on these substances, that it was very huge influence. But the breakthrough here is that although it's a long-term problem, although the effects are not evident until decades in the future. So science was telling us that we will have health problems, but we could not see it at that moment back then. So the damage, always when the damage is not yet occurred, it's very challenging to convince politicians and public about the importance of that. So that's why the agreement needed in the beginning to be flexible and capable of the adaptations to accommodate all the scientific assessments. And that's why it started only with a framework and then followed by the progress. So if you would like to learn more about it, you can find the handout of the convention. That is the 12th edition of that. I added in the slides with the link. I'll also share the slides later on. But last point I want to mention is that the future progress and the lessons that we should learn from the progress, from the success of Vienna and Montreal agreement. So first point is that it started to give us the awareness about that we all are connected. The planet, the human system, and all other ecosystem and other life on Earth. So planetary health is very important to maintain our own health, and that should be the main priority for everyone, because at the end of the day, what's happening in the planet, it doesn't matter where, is that in the atmospheric layers or under the ground, ocean, or in the ecosystems, at the end of the day, it will affect us severely. So one important point here is about the planetary boundaries. Those are some sort of the main challenges that our environment and our planet Earth is facing. And you could see that the ozone depletion is no longer a crisis. And that's, you can just give it a few moments and imagine if none of what I mentioned has been done. So we could have easily found, now we're talking about 3+1 planetary crisis, but it could have been 4+1 if we didn't start that. And although we didn't exactly know the impact about the ozone depletion, like the real impact and the exact consequences, but since we started early, we managed to solve it. And now we are below like the boundary. So we are operating in the safe limits. And when we compare that with the climate change or the biodiversity laws or all other major crises, um, it's like very challenging. And although the science is telling us, the IPCC assessments, all the UNAP outlooks and assessments are saying that we are having real problems, but the world is still not taking the lessons from Vienna Convention and the way we tackled ozone uh, depletion problem. And that's why we as youth have to do our part on raising the ambitions and working on activism's work towards convincing the policymakers and the public to accept that we are facing multiple environmental challenges and a lot of things need to be done, although we cannot see the impact yet. But that's very important for the future generations. So with that, I conclude my presentation for this capacity building. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please write it in the chat. Thank you so much, guys.